friends. Welcome to Sky House Herbs podcast. I'm Ashley Elenbaas, a clinical herbalist, and in this space, I share my knowledge and experience with plant medicine to help you on your own journey of healing and transformation. Join me in exploring the ancient wisdom of plant spirit medicine and how it can be used to heal the body, mind, and spirit. We'll talk to experts in the field and share stories from people who've been transformed by powerful plant allies. New episodes are released each Monday, so please subscribe. And now, let's explore this mystical world of plant medicine together. Hey everyone, welcome in. Today we have a very exciting topic. We're going to talk about plant spirit medicine. And this is a topic that I know some of you who have been listening to me for a while, you subscribe to my channel, you've heard me talk about plant spirits before and plant spirit medicine, but I wanted to dedicate a whole talk to this to really explore what it is, how it works, who are some of the major players and teachers of plant spirit medicine, and how you can use it. So today we are going to explore all of that. Before we do, if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please do. It helps people to find me. My goal is to try to reach 10,000 subscribers. I think I'm at like 7.15 today. So I'd love to get to 10,000. That just helps more people find me, find my work, and get support from the plants, which is really my whole purpose for being here and offering free content. So subscribe, like the video if it's helpful, share it if you know someone who you think might enjoy it as well. Today's topic, I just want to go over some of the big kind of brush strokes before we dive into the nitty gritty. We're going to talk about what is plant spirit medicine. I'm going to give you some examples of plants that can be used in this way. I'll share some stories of my own clinical experience, having over, 12 years now of clinical experience working with plants and working with plant spirit medicine, and then how to use this for yourself. How can you apply plant spirit medicine to your own life, and how do you connect with plants in this way? All right, let's dive in. What is plant spirit medicine is the place that we need to start, because this will set the tone and help you understand everything that follows. Plant spirit medicine is a way of using plant medicine for the deeper healing of an individual. And it's not just the pharmacological or the biochemical effects of plants, which is helpful. So in more traditional herbal medicine, we view a plant as sort of this machine or storehouse of chemicals. And these chemicals have very specific traceable effects in the body, and they can change physiology in various ways. That's valid. I use herbs for that too. If I have a cold, I use herbs that are going to be helpful for all of my symptoms. But plant spirit medicine is a little different. What we're still using the same plant, but instead of using it for its chemicals, we're connecting with the plant and trying to gain deeper healing on a more soul or spiritual level. So it's kind of like if you go to a doctor versus a therapist. If you have a cut or a skin condition, if you have asthma, if you have some medical condition, you go to the doctor, and then the doctor can, help you figure out what to do. But if you're dealing with heartache or grief, or you're dealing with, like a big change in your life, like a move or a loss of a job, going to your doctor, they might give you some ideas, but they might also throw some compounds at you that don't address on the spirit level of what's going on. What a therapist will do is they'll say, tell me more about this grief. Where is it in your body? How does it feel? When is it better? When is it worse? And through the therapeutic engagement, you'll start to feel better because you're starting to process emotional and spiritual material. And so the therapist creates an environment where a deeper understanding, processing, and healing can take place. And that's what plant spirit medicine is. It's using the same tool, which is a plant, but for a different purpose. And there's a wonderful herbalist who practiced, he's now passed. His name is Eliot Cowan. And so I've been reading up. I read his book, Plant Spirit Medicine, I want to say about 10 years ago. And it was very deeply impactful of my practice with plants. And lately I've been listening to a lot of recordings of teachings and classes that he held online. And what I love about the way he speaks about plants is he said in one of his talks, you know, if the goal is healing, does it matter what gets us there? Right. So, he's like, the thing is that this medicine works. And for people who have a very rational mind and they were like, well, how? Well, I mean, there are certain ways, even in Western medicine, we don't know how. Like, why is it that one person can go into remission from cancer and another person doesn't? We can follow the numbers, but it doesn't tell us why. It doesn't tell us how. But we know that one person might get better and one person might not. And also with certain medications, it's really interesting. Like right now with, what is it? Uh, Semaglutide. There's like all of this stuff coming out. It's like, oh, well, semaglutide doesn't just help with weight loss and with blood sugar regulation. It also seems to help with addiction. Oh, it also seems to help with depression and anxiety. Oh, look, it's also seeming to help with all of these other markers. So, sometimes with even pharmaceutical drugs, there are effects that are more broad reaching than what the original drug was designed for. And plants, I think, are very much the same. So when we're thinking about like therapeutic healing, what Eliot said, what I thought was so powerful was, just know that it works. Like it's the same thing with like acupuncture, right? And Eliot Cowan, was an acupuncturist as well. And he was like, we understand that there are nerve receptor sites and there's these reflective responses that go through the body, but we don't understand why. Why does that acupuncture have such a profound healing effect in the body? Well, from the Chinese system, which is completely energetic and has a whole map of the energetic pathways of the body. Well, that map, it does explain why it works. And it's also this idea of qi or life force that is built into the Chinese medicine philosophy. But in Western medicine, we've sort of lost. We used to have what we call the vital force. And that was very highly respected as part of the healing process. Now it's very, mechanical. But this idea that if you don't understand and you don't believe in plant spirit medicine, just wait until it works and then you'll believe it. And then it won't really matter. You're like, I feel better. And one of the things he said too in this talk was, he was like, the thing is that when we hit the person on a soul level, like if we can use a plant to touch their spirit, all of the symptoms will start to fade and go away because the illness and the symptom pattern is connected to the person's deepest state of well-being and health. And that health is connected to the vital force. The health is connected to this person's spirit. So when we touch the spirit, all of the other things start to get better. Now, that's not to say as herbalists, we can't still go after the symptoms. But isn't it nice to know that there are other ways as well? And some of you who are listening are probably already believers. You have had experiences with plants or with maybe psychedelic experiences where you really understand there is a lot more to healing than meets the eye that can be collected in data. So plant spirit medicine is also, it's a relational healing. It's not necessarily a cause and effect, but it's about two spirits coming together and having a relational experience. And Eliot Cowan says in his book, he says the key ingredient to plant spirit medicine is friendship. I just love that. That makes my heart feel so full, and it feels so true and right that the key ingredient when we're working with plants on a spirit level is friendship. And friendship, as we all know, includes respect, honoring, openness, curiosity, right? Like a good friendship has curiosity, that you ask questions, there's dialogue, there's give and take, and there's respect. So that is really the cornerstone. If friendship is the cornerstone, and then all of the things that go along with friendship come into play when we work with plant spirit medicine. So I wanted to share a story from Eliot Cowan that he shared in an episode. I'll add a link to this particular um, YouTube episode where he teaches about, I think he calls it like this, the silent teachings of plants. It's really a beautiful talk. But he said he was sharing a story about a friend of his who was in the Amazon and was there to, learn about herbs. And so he was with a shaman in the Amazon jungle of South America, and his friend asked the shaman, like, can you tell me the names of plants and what they're used for as we're walking through the jungle? I think they were in search of like one particular plant. And the shaman, the guide goes, yeah, sure. So they're walking through the jungle, and he's like, oh, there's this plant and it's used for this, and there's this plant, we use it for that, it helps with this. And the American is writing it all down, right? Like writing down the name and what it's used for. And they get about, they're halfway through their day, and the shaman, the medicine man, like turns back to the American and goes, what are you doing? What are you doing here? And he goes, oh, I'm writing down the names and the uses of the plants. And he goes, well, why? And the American goes, well, so that I can remember them and I can go back home and I can use the plants myself. And the shaman just started laughing, like deep laughing, and just gave him the funniest look. And then later they went back to the community, and they were sitting around the fire and they were eating a meal together. And the guide who was in the forest with this American said, hey, guess what this guy was doing today? Guess what he said? And they were like, what? And he goes, he said he was writing down all the names of the plants and what they do so he could use them on his own when he gets home. And the whole group just started laughing so hard. And the American was like puzzled, like, why are they laughing? Why is this so funny? And they explained to him, that's not how the plants work. You can't just know what it is and then pick it and use it. Like, the plant has to pick you. The plant has to show itself to you or to a medicine person, and only then will it work. And he was like, oh. And I think that story exemplifies the way a lot of traditional people who work with plant spirit medicine, because this is a practice that comes from, it's indigenous to many different peoples, from the original sort of shamanic people in North Asia down to South America, in the North Americas, the indigenous people of this region, also the indigenous people of Europe. They communed with the plants. I mean, in my family lineage as a Lithuanian and Sicilian, my grandfather talked about how in Lithuania, even today, they revere the oak tree as a god. They talk to it, they sing to it, they offer it milk. It's a living god. And so there are a lot of cultures around the world that have a lot of respect. And it's not like you just go and take a medicine because you need it. No, no, no. There's a two-way reciprocal relationship. And there's people who can serve as intermediaries. And one thing that's really interesting, to skip ahead a little bit, of how you can work with plant spirit medicine is through the dream space. And this is a very, very common way that many different indigenous cultures would have the plants come to them, would be through dreams. And I dream about plants. I wish I dreamt about them more, but I do have dreams about plants, and they do pop into my consciousness. And that's one of the ways I work with plant spirit medicine. But in a dream, I always pay attention. Like, if a plant comes to me in a dream, it is important. Like, I know it's not just a dream, because in most societies that are non-Western, the dream space is just as real, just as powerful as the waking space. And I remember I lived in Australia for a year, and I did some studies of Aboriginal Australian medicine, and up in the Daintree region. And in the indigenous practices of Australia, the Aboriginal people, and I should say indigenous people, really, they view the dream time as what is real, and waking life as the dream. And so they go back and they're with their ancestors, they're with their whole lineage, they're with all of the cosmos when they're in the dreaming and their dream time. Then they come into the waking life to work things out and to, be in a different type of dream space. And that people come in and out of the dreaming into bodies, but that the dreaming is actually the more literal, real living space. So if we flip reality like that, and we consider for a minute that, is the dream world actually just a different world, not less real, but just a different state of consciousness and life? Because we're still alive, and we spend half of our lives, well, maybe not half, but like a good amount of our lives dreaming or asleep. So why would that part of our consciousness not be also helpful and important to pay attention to? So I just wanted to add that in, because I think that the dream space is a great, if you've had dreams and they feel almost real, and you've had, like, I don't know if you've ever had a dream where you've been like really deeply touched or healed, or you've seen a pattern, you're like, whoa, I know what that dream means. And you get insight into something that you have been struggling with for years. Healing can happen in the dream space. And so messages can come through and the plants can come through as well. All right. So how do we work with plant spirit medicine? We can work with it through dreams. We can work with plant spirit medicine through a practitioner of some kind who has experience with working with plants in this way. And then each of us can also work with plants just by sitting with them. And I'll talk through some exercises at the end of how to do that work. But I wanted to talk about the plants, because I know this is a question that lots of people ask, which is, well, which plants are the best ones to work with? If I'm going to work with plant spirits, like, tell me the best ones. And that's not a great question because it's not about, there's not like a handful of plants that are far superior for doing this healing work than others. It's really more of an individual experience. So pretty much I will say this, all plants can be used in plant spirit medicine, even a poisonous plant. Not you could, because you don't have to ingest the plant into your body to work with a plant. And I had a student just recently who was out, I think she was at like an antique or like a estate sale, and there was this beautiful image of this flower, and it just caught her eye and it like spoke to her, and she loved the frame. And she didn't know what the plant was though, but she was like, I really love this. It's like, it hit me, it spoke to me. I'm like, okay, let's pay attention to that. Well, it turned out that the flower is datura, which is a very strong psychoactive plant that can be poisonous and deadly. So, I'm not going to tell her, oh yeah, you should go start working with this entheogenic plant under, without any supervision. No, but keep that plant on the wall and ask that plant what it is that it has to share with you. Look for that plant in other places. Research its medicinal uses, use it as a guide into the subconscious and into maybe the teachings of that particular plant spirit, and see what comes up. And so that's what she's in the process of doing right now. And I sent her a few articles to read, but this is her journey with datura. She has to figure this out. Why is the plant speaking to her? What does the plant have to show her, and what can she offer to the plant? Because if we're talking about friendship, she'll give it a nice home on the wall. She'll thank the plant. Maybe she grows the plant in her garden. There's all of these different ways that she can reciprocate with that particular plant. Also, I wanted to mention that Matthew Wood, when I've studied with him, when he doesn't have a plant on hand to work with a client, he'll write the name of the plant on a piece of paper and have the client hold the paper. I know that might sound a little crazy, but this is actually also what they do in homeopathy. And Matthew Wood, as many of you might know, studied homeopathy in Europe. And I actually, when I was a very sick kid. I had asthma and hives and digestive issues, and I was allergic to everything. And when I went to a naturopathic doctor when I was 12, my mom took me to him, and he was a homeopath, and he did acupressure, and he used food. And within 6 months, all of those symptoms were pretty much gone. And he used a lot of homeopathy with me. And what he would do is muscle test. So I would hold the bottle of this homeopathic medicine, and then I'd put my finger and thumb together, and he would do a muscle test and see, does holding this medicine make me stronger, or does it make me weaker, or does it not change anything at all? And I do this with my girls, and you can do this not just with homeopathy, but with herbs. So if you're not sure if an herb is right for you, you can have someone else do a muscle test for you. Some people like to use a pendulum, where you take a crystal, and swinging one way means yes, swinging another way means no. So there's a lot of different ways to test herbs to see if they're a good fit for you. But I love that Matthew brought this practice, and he would even just say, I don't have chelidonium. Hold this paper and let's take your pulse and see if anything changes. And it would. Just holding a piece of paper with the plant's name on it. And he would talk a little bit about the plant, and the person's pulse would change. So the power of plant spirit medicine isn't just something that has to be physical. It's actually non-physical. It's more energetic. And that's also how homeopathy works. I don't want to go into what homeopathy is, but you can do some research. It's very, very powerful, potentized, energetic medicine. And then my husband, Adam Elenbaas, some of you might know him. Probably a lot of you do. He's an astrologer and does daily content on astrology for Nightlight Astrology. He spent many years in the Amazon, in Peru, working with ayahuasca, which is an entheogenic medicine. And he did ceremonies in the jungle with traditional shamans. And one of the things that he told me was that they would do these plant diets where they would make individual teas for people based on what they were dealing with. And then the person could then call on those plants at any time, and the medicine would come back to them because they had connected with the spirit of the plant. It wasn't just like, for example, sometimes I'll do this like with nettles. I've drank so much nettles in my life. It's like one of my deep soul plant allies. And so if I start to feel eczema coming back, if I don't have access to brewing more nettles, I'll just call nettles. I'll say, okay, nettles, I'm starting to get this itchy rash again. Yes, I've been eating sugar. I know, not good. I'll stop that. Will you come help? And it's pretty amazing how just calling in, I'll start to feel in my body a sensation of what it feels like. I'm like, because my body remembers. My body remembers what nettles feels like in it. So I can call upon the plant and recreate. And you could say, oh, maybe it's placebo. Sure. But if it works, doesn't matter. I don't think so. So to me, it's the plant, and it's the power of my mind and the power of my body working in relationship, in friendship together, that creates that change. So some of the herbs that I personally work with a lot with plant spirit medicine, like these are herbs that I know very well, and that often come to me and pop into my head when I'm working with clients because, I understand them, and I have a long relationship with them, having taken them for years. Nettles is definitely one. Bee balm is a very special friend that I just love that medicine. So that's Monarda fistulosa and Monarda didyma. I'm starting to get to know better this year. Black cohosh, Damiana, chamomile has become a really nice friend and ally. Lemon balm, mimosa, oat straw. So those are just a few of the plants that I've worked with. And if you want to work with plants more deeply, you can take my herbal apprenticeship course. I offer this once a year. Usually it starts in the spring, and you'll get to do a plant. I do plant pairings in my course. So you'll take 2 plants one at a time, and then you'll compare and contrast them, and then you'll mix them together. And that way you get to know individual herbs, what they do in your body, and how to start blending your own herbs together. And this is a great way. So over the course of 12 months, you'll get to know 24 plants. You'll have 24 plants to add into your own body embodied experience of herbal medicine and plant spirit medicine. If you want to get to know the herbs on that level too, it's there. It's all right there. The plants are just waiting for us. But if you are interested, you can go to skyhouseherbs.com. I'll include a link and you can join the course in the spring and sync up with a group of people online who are traveling through this year-long experience together. Okay, now I want to go into some examples and clinical experiences of working with plant spirit medicine and how it's changed people's lives and how I've seen it work in people. Before I do that, I want to acknowledge my teachers because I think it's so important in this work that we honor the lineage that we come from. And so I want to, first of all, acknowledge my own ancestors from my Sicilian side and my Lithuanian side, which both had people who used plants as medicine. And on the Lithuanian side, bees and honey and beekeepers as medicine. So I want to honor that, my own ancestors. And I want to also honor the work of Juliette de Barclai Levy, who was an herbalist and medicine woman from, I forget where she originally is from, like somewhere in Eastern Europe, maybe Hungary or Croatia or somewhere around there. But she traveled the whole world learning about herbs and then came to the United States in the 1960s and 70s and helped the revival of herbal medicine here in the West, here in North America. So I want to thank her. And then also more specifically, the teachers I studied with personally, Bob Duggan, who was the founder of the Thai Sophia Institute. And I just wanted to say this is kind of cool, little story, so I was listening to Eliot Cowan talking about his search for trying to figure out plant spirit medicine. And he said that he was first an herbalist and practicing, but he was like, I know I'm missing something. So he started like poking around and trying to find people who could teach him sort of the old ways of medicine. And he kept coming up again with dead ends. I think this was in the 1970s. So then he heard J.R. Worsley, an acupuncturist from England, speak. And he said, that guy, he's talking in the way that I understand healing. So he moved to Europe or to England, I think somewhere in the UK, and he studied and got his acupuncture certification. And then he taught at the school that J.R. Worsley had founded, and was an acupuncturist. But he knew he was always going to take back the philosophy that he learned with J.R. Worsley back into the plant world. And what's so interesting is that Bob Duggan, who was the founder of Thai Sophia, where I worked for several years, I was his teacher assistant when he taught classes at the University of Maryland, Baltimore. And also I worked as his what is it called when you work in an office and basically like not a personal assistant, but I receptionist. I worked as a receptionist for him in the acupuncture clinic at his school. And I just remember when I heard Bob Duggan speak about the mind, the body, about energy, about the healing process, that it's not about the needle. It's not about the herb. It's about the word and the intention. And he said, you can use anything. And people all over the world have gotten creative with all of these things they can use. But the healing comes from touching the person's spirit. And when you touch their spirit with words or with contact, that is where the healing comes from. And you can support that healing with a plant. You can support that healing with a needle. But you in your own presence and the person in their own spiritual integrity, when there's that relational contact, that's how we have healing. And I just remember like my mind, I just was like, oh my goodness, that makes sense. And so I followed him. I studied at his school. I took all the classes with him I could take. And Yeah, he was a very and he was, I don't know if I looped it back. Well, he studied with J.R. Worsley. So he actually went to England and went through the same program as Eliot Cowan, but he stuck with acupuncture and the word as healing. And Eliot Cowan went back to the United States and started using that same idea, the same principle, but using plants. So I thought that was so neat. Like, how souls, how we gravitate, we find our teachers together, and then we just spread spread the teachings out. But Bob Duggan was a very dear man, and mentor for me. I also want to acknowledge Simon Mills, Matthew Wood, Eliot Cowan, Phyllis Light, and Kat Maier, who have all been very influential in how I see and work with plants. Okay. Side note. All right, this is going to be a longer one today. That's cool though. It happens. All right, so I want to tell you some stories, some clinical examples. So one example was a woman who I had a consultation with from New York City, and she was a very distinguished playwright and had written several different plays that were being performed in New York City. And she was in a creative slump, and she was like, I just feel like I gave everything into this last production, and I have nothing left, and I just feel dry. Um, I feel like my creative juices have been dried out and depleted. And all of a sudden, this is how it happens for me, is I'll see a plant, and it's not visual and it's not auditory. It's kind of hard to describe, but it's like the spirit of a plant will always pop into my peripheral vision on the right side. It'll just like come in. And I was like, oh, iris. And I wrote it down on the upper right side of my intake form, because that's where I put the plants when they pop in. So I wrote it down. I was like, okay, I don't know how this is going to fit. So she kept telling me more and more about her gut is just like slow, and she's having difficulty digesting foods. She looked a little bit puffy around the eyes. I was like, okay, there's definitely some stagnation here. And then she was like, I just feel like she said something around like, I want to be able to recycle the energy that I put into this last production and reuse it and use it into making something completely new. And I was like, that is iris. That is iris. That's what iris does. Iris makes these flowers, and it sort of spiral opens into these beautiful blooms. And then instead of dropping the flower like a lot of plants do, or turning it right into a seed, what the iris does is it slowly sucks the energy and it like curls back in. Like if you've ever seen with the Wizard of Oz, you know how the wicked witch of the East, her shoes like curl in and then they get sucked underneath the house. So it's like that. The plant sucks its energy back in, and then it sends that energy up into the next flower, and then that next flower opens, then it recycles in and it goes up, and it continues that up the stem. And I was like, that's what she's looking for, I think. And all of her symptoms, they match that stagnation, that watery, creative stagnation that is perfect for iris. So I had a tincture of iris root, it's the tuber. And I sent it up to her in New York, and I told her, just take 3 drops twice a day, and let's just see what happens. So in 2 weeks later, she said, I've noticed my digestion has gotten a lot better. Like, I feel like I'm not just sitting in a bunch of goop. Like, I don't feel like I'm, just a phlegmy stuck mess. I feel like things are moving. And I was like, okay, that's good. Keep going. So then 2 weeks later, we checked in, and she goes, Ashley, you'll never believe it. Like, my digestion, I feel completely revitalized. And what I've done is I've taken a lot of the ideas that didn't make it into the last play, but that were integrated around it. And I've put them back together, and I've found some of this like similar themes, but I'm reworking it into a completely new production. And I was like, yes. And she was like, I really can tell. I feel like this plant, like, I don't know what it is, but it's really helping me inner resource and find creative flow again. And I was like, yeah, that's what it does. Of course. So that was a really cool story. Another story is a man who came to me who was kind of curmudgeonly. He was like very shut down. His shoulders were curled in. And he was like, just looked very, very closed. And his wife had died maybe about 5 years before. And he was having issues with his heart. He was having heart palpitations. He had high blood pressure that his doctor wanted to put him on medication, and he didn't want to go on medication. Um, and he just was really lonely. And he was, kind of too proud, and it's funny because I was young. I was probably maybe 25. So this was maybe, yeah, gosh, this was like, no, no, no. I must have been like third in my early 30s. Yeah. So I was in my early 30s and, I was like, well, are you dating? Like, why haven't you, like, what are you doing socially? And it's a little presumptuous, I think, now as I look back, it's like, well, because that's a humongous tragedy in his life. But I was also like, he's really stuck. Everything in his body is very closed down. Um, I, I feel like if he could just open up and engage in some way, his heart would start to heal. And so I in the right side of my vision, I just kept seeing Hawthorn. And Hawthorn is traditionally used for the heart, for all of these things, and for grief. So it made sense that Hawthorn would come in. So but he was very closed down to socializing. He was like, nope, I just like to ride my bike and stay home. And, he was just very private and very solemn. So I think it was like 2 weeks later, he came back. His posture was a little bit more upright. And I was like, okay, this is good. And he was like, yeah, he's like, I'm starting to feel a little bit lighter. Like, I think the Hawthorn's helping me. And we tracked it. And it was about, I think maybe about 6 weeks later, he went to the doctor and had blood work done. And his blood pressure was lower and his triglycerides were low again, low also. And this was just 3 drops of Hawthorn and 3 times a day. And so then I followed up with him a few weeks later, and he came into the office and I didn't even recognize him. He was like sitting upright, his chest was open. He was like happy and jovial. And I was like, oh, hi. Tell me how are things going? He's like, things are great. I joined a cycling club and I met someone and I don't know, but I'm just, like, but we've been kind of hanging out and I'm just feeling really hopeful. I'm really feeling like I'm opening to, maybe connecting with someone from my heart again. But I don't know. But it was like, this is a very clear shift. And he avoided his, he really didn't want to go on. Oh, and I think, what I also had him taking was hawthorn berry extract. So I had him taking 3 drops 3 times a day of hawthorn leaf and flower tincture. And then I had him taking a half teaspoon of Crataegus jam, which is like a sweet jelly that's really good for the heart too. And there you go. Happy as can be, off on his way, didn't have to go on medication. Gosh, I have so many stories. I'll just share a few more. So another story was a yoga student of mine who came from an Indian background, very traditional Indian, and they were trying to do an arranged marriage. So they wanted her to marry this one man because of the families. And she really did not want to marry him. So she came to me for depression. She was like, I'm just really depressed. I don't know what to do. I feel trapped. So I asked some more questions about, like her life. And she's like, well, I'm currently in law school, even though I don't want to practice law, but that's what my parents want me to do. So, like I'm living at home. I'm just feeling really just depressed and sad and trapped. And like, is there anything that can help me feel better? And I'm like, well, probably moving out of the house and figuring some things out on your own. But obviously that's not, that wasn't why she was coming to me. So I in my periphery, I saw horse chestnut and I was like, she needs to get out from under the shade of this parent tree. It's really dampening her life force. She needs to come into her own light. So I had her take 3 drops of horse chestnut tincture 3 times a day. And over the course, this one took a little bit longer. First, she decided to drop out of the well, first she decided to tell her parents she was not going to do the arranged marriage. So that was that was the first thing. Is she was like, I am not going to marry this guy the answer is this is a hard no. Then she dropped out of law school and she started taking the yoga teacher training program at her, and she started teaching yoga. Then she moved out of her parents' house and she found a supplemental job and was able to just be on her own. And then from there, she just started to really grow and thrive. And horse chestnut is a specific remedy for those who, because the horse chestnut tree, it sends out through its roots this poison, so that if any of the babies that fall, like these seeds that fall onto the ground beneath the tree, try to grow, it kills them. So like I was like, this sounds like this is kind of what's happening. She needs to get out from the shade. She needs to get out from this depressing shade from her parents and start to make her own way and start to stand up for her own self and what she needs, but of course in a respectful and loving way. And she still has a good relationship with her parents, but she was able to start to assert herself. um, Personally, I've had some really powerful experiences using Damiana. So I did this as part of the Roots and Spheres course that my husband and I teach. It was the plant of the month. And I had been really working on trying to be more in my body and to listen to my body's needs and to just feel a little more comfortable in my own um, sensuality, and like just feeling safe in my own senses. If that, for someone who grew up in a place where I didn't always feel safe, and not just because of my parents, but just because of the world and where I grew up. But so that's just been something I've been really working on. And I felt like when I started taking Damiana, it was uh, like this warm, sweet medicine that was like very playful and light. That was like, you know what? Have fun. And it also, I noticed that Damiana, like the spirit of Damiana came into my body, and it was almost like you can take a space. You can take space between your activities just to feel yourself. And that was always very scary for me. I always felt like if I stop, everything will fall apart. I have to keep everything going. I got to keep a fast pace. I have to keep focused. Hyper vigilant. That's very common with people who have control issues. And so for me, the Damiana was like, oh no, honey, it's okay. Like take a space, like lay down on the couch. And I never take naps or never just lay down on the couch and read a book. Like I dream of myself doing that, but I never actually do it. But when I was taking the Damiana, I did it. I took naps on the couch and I read books between sessions. And like, I just took that space to be and feel and care for my body and drink. I was like, I'm thirsty. I need to drink water. And that has continued on. So I feel like my experience with that Damiana cycle, like a month of taking it, really shifted my nervous system. And I'm a different person. I am. I haven't gone, when I feel myself slipping back to those old patterns, I know, Ashley, you're stressed out. You need to simplify and you need to take a break right now, so I don't slip into that old pattern. And I haven't. So that's been really cool. All right, I'll save the other stories for another video, but let me know what you think. Did you like these stories? Is this video helpful for you? Do you have stories? And then before we end, I did tell you that I would give you some practices for yourself of how to work with plant spirits. So as I mentioned, make an intention before you go to sleep at night. And this is something my family, we've started doing recently, which is like before we go to bed, we ask for some support or clarity in our dreams. So for example, last night I just said, I want to connect with some ancestral spirits. And sure enough, I did. And that was really interesting. And my girls and my husband will ask questions, and it's amazing how when you set an intention before you go to sleep, your psyche, it might take a few days or even weeks, but just keep asking. Like, I want to know more about this plant, or show me a plant that I can have a relationship with or a friendship with. Ask, set an intention before you sleep, and see what comes up in the dream, and then make sure you try to recall the dream as soon as you wake up by writing it down or telling it to someone. So that's one way. Another way of working with plant spirit medicine is just a plant that you're attracted to. Just, if you're like, I just love peonies, I don't know why, or I just love, like, my sister-in-law loves daisies. Like, if there's a flower that you just love, start to pay more attention to that flower and do some research. What were its medicinal uses? What are its energetic uses? What was it, how was it seen in the language of flowers? There's a great book called Flower Power that goes through the medicinal and the symbolic meaning of different flowers. I'll include a link of that to that book. But just, in your day-to-day life and in your own spiritual and emotional consciousness, if you're attracted to a plant, follow it. And if it's safe to take internally, take it internally and start to work with that plant and start to build a relationship. That's a really easy way. Another way to work with a plant is to go outside if you can, if you can go out in nature and just sit with a plant and be in its natural environment, you'll be amazed at how much you can learn about a plant just by sitting quietly and listening and observing and watching and intuiting things about the plant. So you can do this practice, just go outside, find any old plant, sit with it, take a pen and paper, draw the plant to the best of your ability, write down words or images or thoughts that come to mind, and then use some sort of botanical identifier. I really like, it's called Picture This. It's a botanical identification app, and then look it up and see what it is, and then do some research and see what that plant is used for, or more about that particular plant. And you'll be quite surprised. Most people can really, just by sitting with a plant, can learn a lot about it and actually confirm a lot of uses and energetics in that way, doing it kind of backwards rather than research a plant and then go sit with it, and then go research it. So you can try that and see what comes up. And then also, working with a practitioner who works with plant spirits in this way. And then the last thing I'll say is, as always, with all herbs, be respectful. Don't take plants that you are not sure about. And, always do your research for yourself and make sure that a plant is safe, that you double check your resources and your references. If you're not sure, just don't take it internally. Just work with it energetically. I have a video on how to make flower essences. You can always make a flower essence. It's a very safe way of working with plant energy medicine. If in doubt, reach out to someone, like reach out to me. Let me know, like, hey, what is this plant? I keep thinking about it. Let me know, and I can do an episode. If I get enough people who want to know about certain plants, I can just put together, like, you asked, and then answer your questions about what those plants might be trying to say. All right, y'all. Thank you. This is a nice long video. As always, I appreciate you watching. Please subscribe, follow, click on notifications so you can know when my next video comes out. And I'll include a lot of links in the description of other talks of mine that you can refer to, and then resources that I mentioned in today's talk. So thanks, y'all. Have a good day. Bye.